So hi everybody, welcome to the September Grassroots Conference Call. If we haven't had a chance to meet, my name's Aaron Oxley and I'm the Executive Director of Results UK. As you may have just heard, I did manage to get a few weeks holiday, which is why I wasn't on the call last month. And I hope that all of you have had some really refreshing breaks as well. If there are any new people on the call this evening, very special welcome to you. Do you want to introduce yourselves? It's not obligatory, but it's always nice to be able to say hello to new folks. Hi Jill, you're not new, but we'll welcome you anyway. Welcome to the call.
Hi there.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's kick straight into it then. So we'll start the call with the usual review of some of the latest developments in the world of advocacy on global policy.
He's on my
phone. Hi Karen, how you doing? Then we'll have a roundup of your advocacy around the country. Then we'll introduce our guest speaker and the topic of the call, which is once again on supporting international aid. It's a familiar topic for many of you, but one whose importance means we do need to return to it regularly at crucial moments like the one we now find ourselves in. But before we get to that, we have something to celebrate. It's not often we have immediate campaign victories, but this month we absolutely have. A really big thank you to all of you that were able to take last month's campaign action, which was to contact your MPs and ask them to write to the new Secretary of State for International Development, Alok Sharma, asking him to fund the Education Cannot Wait initiative, or ECW. Called that because education cannot wait in emergencies and crisis situations. Those kids need to keep going to school. What we asked for was a minimum of £75 million. Now, our call was on the 6th of August, but on the 25th of August, the G7 summit in New York, Boris Johnson announced an unprecedented £90 million contribution to Education Cannot Wait. This is a really clear indication that the work of ECW was recognised at the highest levels of government. That £90 million is the largest single contribution received by ECW so far, and it's going to give 600,000 children, that's more than 500,000 children and young people living in conflict and emergency situations, the chance of a better future through access to education. I really want to say a big, huge thank you to all of you who wrote letters, for those of you that managed to get in ahead of the announcement, and also for those who wrote after, thanking the government for their support of ECW. I think maybe I should go on holiday more often if this is the kind of result we get. But of course, Results was not the only organisation asking for this contribution. We're really proud to have been standing alongside the other organisations in the Send My Friend to School campaign. As many of you will know, Send My Friend is actually housed in the Results UK offices and literally sits right next to me. We've all worked together on this to get this comparably modest but critically important replenishment. Now, when I say modest, I say that only in comparison to one of the other victories we've had, this £1.4 billion we recently helped secure for the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB and malaria. But I hope that you'll agree with me that helping 600,000 people, children and young persons, gain access to an education is by no means a modest achievement. It's really huge. But this ECW victory and the impact it will generate in transforming the lives of over 500,000 children and some of the most vulnerable and precarious situations in the world shows how even relatively smaller amounts of funding can have tremendous impact when well directed into the highest impact interventions. Don't forget that while some of us are skeptical of Boris Johnson's very recent conversion to the cause of spending 0.7% of our gross national income on international aid, he has been supportive of education and girls' education in particular for a long time. At last April's Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in London, that was when he was Foreign Secretary, he announced support for the Platform for Girls' Education and asked fellow leaders to join him in signing up to 12 years of quality education for the world's most marginalised girls by 2030. So we're really pleased that his track record on education has continued with this latest announcement, and the government deserves praise for their leadership. We're going to put a link to the latest announcement on Education Cannot Wait into the chat box. And for those of you that can't see that, it'll be up in the description of the recording of this call, which will appear on our website in a few days' time. So, following on from that very good news, we now need to make sure that the UK keeps making good decisions about how to spend UK aid. As I said, it's not just the amount spent, but on how focused it is on actually overcoming poverty and how effectively it's spent that matters. Now, as many of you know, Not all government aid spending is as effective as DFID's is when it's acting at its best. And we really need to make sure that all government departments up their game in terms of effectiveness, focus, and transparency. This will be particularly important, I think, as last month's Naveed shared that Boris was quoted as saying that we could make sure that 0.7% is spent more in line with Britain's political, commercial, and diplomatic interests, end quote. The best aid can manage to meet that dual objective of commercial and diplomatic interests and the alleviation of poverty, but by law, all aid since 2002 must have poverty alleviation as its primary goal. So we must continue to remind our government of that. Secretary of State Alok Sharma has also expressed that his intentions for DFID include a new focus on boosting trade and economic development. And as we'll hear from our speaker in a few minutes, it's important that the government hears what the public's priorities are for how UK aid is spent. We believe that the initiatives such as Education Cannot Wait and other spending on health, education, and nutrition are things that directly help people living in poverty and will enable them to live better, more productive lives. And that will have a knock-on effect on the sustainable economic prosperity that comes when countries have a healthier, better educated population. The evidence for the causality to work in the direction of human development leading to economic prosperity rather than the other way around is really very strong.
Yeah, I just emailed it to you.
Now, if you've seen this month's action materials, you'll see that we're using the term human development to describe the kinds of interventions I've just mentioned. This is a broad term which encompasses programs that aim to directly benefit people, to improve their well-being and to increase the range of choices they can make about how they live their lives and support their families. Lastly from me, I want to mention this month's campaign action, which is the social and online media actions or blogging on the importance of these human development programs. At the end of the month, we're going to see the United Nations General Assembly hold its annual round of meetings in New York, including sessions that are directly relevant to the campaign action and results' work more broadly. First up in New York, there's going to be a United Nations high-level meeting on universal health coverage. You remember there was one last September on tuberculosis that we were banging on about for a bit. This year, it's on universal health coverage, or UHC. The idea of universal access to basic healthcare without having to face economic hardship is one of the key ideas contained in the global goals. And it's actually the headline goal of Global Goal 3 on health. In the chat box, we're going to put links to a couple of useful pieces of material. One is a short leaflet on Health for All, which some of you may have already seen, explaining why UHC is so important. And a second, very new resource, it's a 4-page summary of our brick by brick report. As some of you will know, we launched it shortly after the national conference earlier this year, but we've got a shorter summary because the full one is quite large. But that talks about how all these different funding mechanisms that we in Results work on, such as the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, TB and Malaria, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, the Nutrition for Growth Agenda, and how all of these are critical for achieving universal health coverage. That should be going in the chat box just now. Other meetings at the UN later this month include one on the global goals, known as the SDG Summit on the 24th and 25th of September. And there's also going to be a number of meetings on climate change. If you want to go deep into the weeds on all this, the details of all these meetings are online at un.org/sustainable development. And we're putting that link up into the chat box now too. So that's it for me right now. I'm going to hand over to Della to give you the usual roundup of your advocacy over the last month. Over to you, Della.
Thanks, Aaron. I just wanted, before I go through what's been going on in the network, I wanted to mention quickly that we're going to be planning our next advocacy training day for all of you sometime in October or November. I don't have many more details than that at the moment, but we will be sending them out to you via email as soon as we can. I think these training days are a really good way to meet up with other people in the network, and especially good if you're a new member and you want to learn a bit more about advocacy techniques and the issues we work on. So look out for that. And if any of you need help with the cost of travel, then we're happy to reimburse you as well. So let us know if you need any help with that. I wanted also to echo Aaron's thank you for all your letters and the meetings you arranged on the Education Cannot Wait replenishment campaign. And thanks to everyone who's already let me know that they've sent a thank you letter to Alok Sharma. So keep us informed if you're doing that as well, because I think that would be really nice. So in terms of what the network has been up to, you've all been really busy over the last month. I'm going to be going up to Edinburgh in the next couple of weeks to help Kathy there with a volunteer fair, and I'm also going to be able to meet William and some of the other Linglithgow members, hopefully. But firstly, I will mention an event that the London group put on recently where they engaged with members of the public about UK aid. I know Stephen's on the call, so Stephen, would you want to say a little bit more about what you did? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So, get my mic up a bit. There we go. Yeah, so we just thought we'd kind of test the waters a bit and try taking a walk to Hyde Park and kind of just approaching members of the public and seeing if we could get some of their thoughts on UK aid and ask whether they'd be happy to pose with us, you know, for photos on Twitter. And yeah, I thought it was going pretty well. I think we got some good kind of responses from that. It was definitely worth doing. I think what we found after a while was we were a bit kind of hesitant about approaching a lot of people because, you know, things like families with young kids, they seem to get distracted very quickly. So. So we ended up not approaching maybe as many people as we were hoping for, but I think we got some good responses.
Thank you, Stephen. It definitely takes guts, I think, to go up to strangers in the park. So, so Gill as well has been busy organising an event around nutrition. Do we have Gill on the call? I can't see her. Okay, if she's not here,
she was, but she seems to have gone, I'm afraid.
Well, I'm going to put a link in the chat box with all the details, but it is in London on the 28th of September. If any of you could make it and go down and support her, that would be great. It's going to be linking domestic nutrition and hunger with international nutrition issues. And it's going to have Callum from the office, who's one of our nutrition leads, speaking as well. So best of luck, Gill. Nicole from Sheffield also maybe wanted to share about a recent trip that she's just come back from. So I'll hand it over to you, Nicole, if you'd like to say a bit more.
Yeah, sure. So basically myself and Becky from the Sheffield group in June and July, we went to South Africa and Lesotho to work with some development trusts there. And basically what we were doing there is activating these kind of inventions called wonder bags, which are basically insulated slow cookers. And we were going into communities and kind of showing them what they are, and because a lot of these communities cook over open flames, and these wonder bags help keep the nutrition in so it's not burning away, and
so they're not breathing in smoke.
Yeah.
And we went to the factory in Durban and we bought 200 and we sold them at a subsidised amount. So we bought them for £20 each, and then we sold them into communities for £3. And we cooked, and we walked sometimes 5 miles a day to really remote communities. And at the end, all 200 had gone. So if people couldn't afford them, they could pay them off weekly, like 50p a week. And it was really nice to cook with the women and children. And we cooked pap, and we had spinach, and then we cooked beans.
And it was just good to work with the kids, the development trust there, and see how the work's going to be passed on and sustained throughout the time there.
And we planted about 80 trees as well, fruit trees and wood trees.
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm sure everyone's definitely interested to hear.
It was a good time. It's a good time.
We want to go back, don't we? To do some more work.
Amazing. Thank you. I know Gill is back on the call, so I wonder if she wanted to say a bit more about her event that she's got coming up. Sorry to put you on the spot, Gill.
That's all right. It's the internet suddenly went kaput. So sorry. Am I off mute?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. On the 28th of September this month, we're organising a day's conference on nutrition, hunger and food security, and that's globally and in the UK. So we've got somebody from End Hunger UK coming, Annie Connolly, who runs the outfit. And we've got our very own Callum, who's talking in the morning about nutrition and the wider thing of it. all welcome. Starts at 10 o'clock with coffee. We've got a shared lunch, so if you want to come, bring something to share for lunch. And what else? And it'll finish at 4 o'clock. So how it pans out in between, everybody's welcome. It's in Euston, near Euston Station, and I can put the link up if you want more.
We've got the event on our website as well, so I can put the link to that.
Oh yeah, that's probably better because I'm not fully functioning here at the moment.
Okay, I can do that.
I've gone on to
the link is already in the chat box.
Oh,
It's
great.
it's the bottom link if you can see it at the moment.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, it's suddenly the internet went kaput.
Okay, thank you, Jill.
And I've had to sign all back in again. I don't know what happened there. Okay, thanks very much. Everybody's welcome, and anybody that you can tell about it.
Thank you. And lastly, I know we've got Helen and Reg from the pool group on the call. I wonder if anyone from the group would want to share a bit more about what you've been up to, because I know you had a stall recently at a local fair. So I'll hand over to you if you want to fill us all in on how it went.
Hello, yes, we did indeed. Angela was our star, actually. She was the one who managed to talk to the most people. She caught their eye and she nailed them straight away and got them to come over to the stall and look at the demonstration we had, which was a piece of card with 100 pennies on it. And people were asked to try and guess how much we spent on overseas aid. And it was very interesting, some of the answers we got.
If that 100 pennies represented our total national income. So if that was our total national income, how much did we give away in aid? And of course it's the 0.7%, so it's less than one of these pennies. And we painted the bit that we do give away on one of the pennies, and it was clear it was not very much really. And people were quite surprised, mostly, but it was so little.
We had some very good conversations. It was worth doing, wasn't it?
Yes, and then we got people to write postcards.
Yeah, we have a stack of postcards done. Yeah.
You've
Did you get all?
modestly forgotten to mention the fact that you raised £550 for results as well.
That's different.
That was on the cream teas weekend. It was always the same weekend, which was quite a burden actually. It was hard work, wasn't it, doing all that? But yes, it's been added to since. It's actually over 600 now. People have been giving me money because they couldn't come. So that's brilliant.
Thank you so much for all your hard work. It sounds like you've had a really busy weekend and really fruitful. Thanks for sharing. We're going to be posting a blog because the pool group have done such a great write-up of their weekend. We're going to post it as a blog as well. So keep an eye out for that on our website. Did anyone else on the call want to share anything that they've been up to while we're here? I'll open the floor. No? Okay, in that case, just want to say thanks again for everything you've been doing, as always, and do keep us in the loop of what actions you've been taking and any responses you're getting as well from DFID or parliamentarians. And I'll hand over back to you, Aaron. Thank you.
Thanks, Stella. And also from me also a really big and special thank you to the pool group for the cream tea. I've said it a few times before, but I'll say it again. The unrestricted money that comes in either through monthly donations or through grassroots fundraising is really the gold dust. It lets us do things that otherwise we'd really struggle to get funded, and you guys are just absolute rock stars for taking that on and doing it. That money is not modest. Its effect is very much outsized. One final note on that, if you're a relatively new grassroots member and currently don't give to Results financially, just have a think if you'd like to. There's a big donate link at the top of our website where you can set up, well, one-off gift or start giving monthly. It's all very easy. But I've always said that if given the choice of having your time or your money, I'll always pick your time, because that's how we're going to change the world, is by giving our time to things that we care about. But money's always nice too. Enough of that, and onto the topic of tonight's call. As I mentioned earlier, tonight we're talking about the very important topic of making sure that UK aid supports vital human development programs that are necessary if we're to continue to focus aid on overcoming poverty in a sustainable way. Now, in our meetings with DFID officials, we hear no shortage of evidence that they understand that these programs work and that they need supporting. But what we also hear, in a quiet voice that's only as loud as a good civil servant can be given their position as servants, is a worry that at the leadership level of DFID, and they aren't hearing strongly enough that there's public support for this continued focus, particularly the political leadership. Now, I can't imagine that many ordinary citizens in the UK think about human development where they think about what they'd like to write to Mr. Johnson about. But this is something Results is in a great position to support on. And it's what you guys do every month, whatever action you take. However, every so often we do need to reach out more widely with specific messages of support. And this month seems like the right time, once again, to be contributing a more visible public dialogue on aid and on what it achieves. So I've noticed he's on the call, which is great. It's my very great pleasure to introduce Chris Mitchell from the One campaign. He's joined us this evening to answer your questions on why visible public support for effective UK aid is something we do need to keep working on. He's going to talk to us a little about what the opportunities are now and what are some of the more effective ways of using your local media and social media to reach politicians and the public with your views on the importance of well-spent UK aid. Now, Chris is the UK media officer at the One campaign. He's got a ton of experience managing media activity in politically sensitive environments. And the One campaign has been playing a leading role in the aid coalition, of which Results is also a part, helping to gain support for international aid at a time of increased skepticism and political turmoil. So that really does make Chris an ideal person to be with us on tonight's call. So hi, Chris.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
No, absolutely our pleasure. Welcome very much to our Grassroots Conference Call. A big thank you for taking time out of your evening to be here with us. We really appreciate it. Let me introduce to you who we have on the call this evening. We're joined tonight by volunteer advocates from all over the country who take regular campaign actions to overcome global poverty, from all the way up in Scotland right down to the south coast, the length and breadth of the country. They're all really looking forward to what you have to say about the current challenges to UK aid. And as you know, we're going to start with 3 pre-arranged questions for you, and then we'll open up to questions from the floor. For those of you on your computers, please do ask questions using the chat function on the side of the screen, and I'll read those out for the benefit of people on phones. And for those of you on the phones that can text in, if you prefer to do that, the number this month is 0777 56 11178. That's 0777 56 11178. Now, Chris, before we take these questions, we like to always start by asking our guest speaker to say a little bit about themselves. Now, I've already introduced you, but we'd like to hear from you. What is it for you personally that makes this topic so important? What makes you get up in the morning to come into work, and how did you get involved in this work?
Oh, so really nice, simple question, which I'm sure I can answer in a sentence. No. So I guess, actually, it comes down for me to 2 things, values and optimism. This field plays to my values. I believe in justice. I believe in working for a better world, for optimism, and the belief that we can make a better world that is more equal, more prosperous, safer, healthier, just better for everyone, regardless of where you are in, on the planet. In terms of what got me into it, it was sort of typical, well, not typical, but like my aunt ran a charity. I was very fortunate that she had that connection out in what is now Myanmar and Burma, helping refugees there. And, as a teenager wanting to change the world and that was something that really appealed to me. But specifically in terms of my job as a media person, as a comms person, I believe I'm fascinated by media. I'm fascinated by the way it influences people, the way it can change opinions, the way it can really rile people up. All you need to do is look at the media over the past few months and years regarding the current political situation, shall we say, to see how kind of it just galvanizes people and catalyzes people to do things, sometimes quite extreme, but so the media has an impact and politicians pay attention to that impact. And I remember bit cheesy. The first time I wrote a quote that was printed in a newspaper, it was a real buzz, because I know that in some small way that will have altered the course of history. That quote, that media appearance will never, ever, ever disappear. It will always be there. So combining my values and optimism for hope, and also being able to influence and push that agenda further forward through the media. Yeah, a bit trite, a bit lofty, but yeah, I guess that's how I'd answer that.
Thanks, Chris. It's always wonderful to hear people's stories. They're always so inspiring, and I'm sure that what you said doesn't sound cheesy at all to most of the people on this call. I think they're probably, many of them are thinking along very similar lines. We're going to go into our prepared questions, so please do introduce yourself before asking Chris your question. If my notes are correct, the first question tonight does come from Glasgow. If we have Glasgow on the, I'm looking for Glasgow.
We don't have Glasgow on the call.
Oh wait,
so I
no,
think
it's not
Sheffield.
Glasgow. Sorry, Sheffield's going to do it. My notes were not correct. Sheffield, sorry, stealing your thunder, sending you far too far north. Please go ahead, Sheffield.
So my name's Becky and this is Nicole. So we're here based at Sheffield. So the first question is, how solid is the new government's support for UK aid? Are ministers really just interested in the UK's self-interest?
Okay.
And bearing in mind this call's being recorded and will be on the internet later.
Well, everything I always say is on record unless it's off record. And also just considering the time that this call is happening right now in Parliament, Lord knows what's happening, whether we'll still have this new government this time tomorrow. I mean, obviously, yes, but I think it's really, really important to remember that things are in a massive state of flux at the moment. And honestly, they've got one big fish to fry, and that is Brexit. Then there are several other issues, policing, home stuff, and I'm talking about in terms of politics and what plays. So if I'm entirely honest, aid actually is quite low on their agenda. Now that said, they still really want to look like the good guy. They still really want to show that they're not the nasty party, that they are global Britain, that they're compassionate and caring. They also need to figure out new ways to make sure that they do show that they're still on the world stage. So our work helping others, supporting others to support themselves, kind of working with them is paramount, because they need to, I mean, the UK is, in my mind at least, probably the best in terms of aid. We deliver 0.7, we've got some of the most effective aid in the world. We have DFID, the preeminent development agency out there. So in terms of how much its support is, it's very difficult to say in reality, if I'm honest, from a public perspective. But from a kind of tactical political perspective, and specifically in terms of how they like to position themselves publicly, they want to show that they're good. They want to show that they are on the right side of history. They want to show that they're here, they're global and they're kind of caring. So I think they do care. I mean, for instance, I know Boris Johnson, whatever your opinion might be about him, he is quite passionate, or very passionate indeed, about girls' education. Like he said it as soon as he entered number 10. It was, one of the most interesting aspects that wasn't picked up particularly. But yeah, in reality, they do care. But they want to be seen to be caring as well, as much as anything else, is how I'd say. Hope that answers it. I don't know. It's such a broad question. I could talk to you for hours over this.
Well, we'll have plenty of chance to circle back around if people want to follow up on that. I think I can't imagine that we're ready to stop talking about that. I want to just double check who we're going to for the next call. It might be Stephen, I think.
I think so. I think I was back up for this question. So the next question is, will the government really listen to arguments about aid for human development?
So it depends on how you talk about human development, in all honesty. If I'm a media person, well, I am, if I go and talk to a newspaper about human development, they'll probably look at me and say, you what? If I talk about getting people into school, giving people good healthcare, making sure they got jobs, that's what they will listen to. So it's not necessarily the phrase human development, but it's what human development means. And I think there is a really important thing between this. Well, first of all, there's a distinction between public and private. So if you were meeting your MP and it wasn't on record, I'm sure they would have a very different thing. But if you're talking about it in a public sphere, if you're talking about it in a kind of promoted public way, which anyone can pick up on, they want to score points with voters, pure and simple. So making them look good. Now, a really good example of this is if you ask people, and MPs included, do you support aid to prevent maternal mortality? People would probably go, well, I don't like aid. I don't like that, you know. But if you said, do you support helping countries which are poor to make sure that expectant mothers have safe childbirth? They'd be like, yeah, of course I support that. Now, we all know that's the same thing. But the important thing is how you phrase it. It's really, really key when you're making these arguments in a public way to be accessible, to be relatable. Like, it's quite easy, and I know myself as an NGO person, a charity bod, that we get sucked into sort of acronyms and jargon and everything like that. But if you were, imagine you were with your friend talking about this, and the reason I bring this up is because politicians care the same way. If you were talking about kind of all this kind of technical detail, they wouldn't care, or they'd be like, I don't know what you're on about. As soon as you make it open and accessible to them about things they can relate to, like everyone's been to school, and if they haven't, it's a crying shame. Everyone should have that opportunity. So in terms of listening to arguments for human development, they will if you make it accessible, and they will if you make it human. Now, a key point in making it human, I imagine, and forgive me if this is not the case, but I imagine for the people on this call, is there's a thing called people like us, and people generally support people like themselves. There's a herd instinct, if you will, I don't know. So if you say, well, I went to school and it was, you know, helped me gain all the skills that now I've got a job and I've set myself up in life, then yes, they will listen to that. If you make sure that people like us is a sort of thing that they can hear. If you seem abstracted and detached, which frankly international development often does on a very much a local media level, then it'll be a much harder time to use that as a method to persuade the government to care about it. So, sorry, I've sat on the fence with the question. It's sort of a yes, but it depends. Yes, with a big old asterisk, with a lot of caveats. Yeah.
You're allowed caveats because the world is complicated, right? And we have to navigate it and where it is. So I think one of the things that I like most about the group of people that we've got on this call is that they're really willing to grapple with that complexity. So these are good answers. We're going to go over to Birmingham for questions. Oh, go ahead.
Very quickly to kind of build on that. It's great that you're willing to grapple with the complexity, and that is the most important thing. The next stage in terms of talking to local media and or even social media, whatever type of thing is, you have got to distill that complexity into simple bite-sized chunks. If you think about the way, okay, again, think about the pub, but think about any sort of forum where people are talking about it. People are busy, people are tired, people are they feel like there's a lot of burden on them. They've got to pay their bills, they've got to like get home to feed their kids, they've got to like do that. So if you try and say, hey, this is a really big issue, honestly, I can think of so many issues which I'm like, oh, I'm just going to switch off and turn the TV on because it's a lot easier than actually confronting the reality of things. So your job is to mediate and translate all of that complexity and all of that heaviness into a way that, first of all, people can understand, and secondly, people can feel galvanized to want to do something about it. So just to kind of add an addendum there.
Great, very good. I believe we are going to Birmingham for question 3.
Yeah, hi Chris, it's Richard here in Birmingham. The question is, can you recommend some particularly effective uses of media and social media for talking about the value of aid?
Yes, so there are a few things that that instantly leap to mind. and we might be going into one very soon. One of them is an election. Demonstrating to prospective candidates that their constituents or their hopeful constituents care about the issue is a really good way, not only to promote results and to promote the issue of aid, but it's a really good way to hold them to account. So I don't know what constituency you're in, for instance. I don't know, Birmingham, say Yardley, say it's Jess Smith. My girlfriend's from near there, she's from Tyseley, so, you know, that's her. So, you know, getting Jess Smith on record to say, I care about aid, get a nice photo in the Birmingham Mail or Post, whichever one, and then a couple of, you know, a year down the line, still an MP and all of that, hoping, who knows what's going to happen. You can say, hey, you're on record doing this, so you need to, you know, put your money where your mouth is. You need to speak up in Parliament. You need to go and do that active. So elections are really good. There's other stuff around, for instance, when 0.7 got into was enshrined in law. So there was two levels at least, well, among many, that were really interesting there. First of all, the NGO sector did a joint letter, which is always a fun experience. But we had a letter in the paper just around the time that it was beginning to be enshrined in law, or just as the debate was happening. I can't remember the exact details, but long story short, that was a clear example of a huge constituency of support that the MPs who were going to vote on that bill knew they could count on. So they weren't going to vote on something that was unpopular. They knew that we had their back, and everyone who worked for or volunteered for or was part of these organizations had their back. There is actually almost a weird thing about self-interest here, which is one thing, but the point being that if you can show that it is in their interest to do something and it's a good thing and a moral thing, that is great. Another thing I would say is, and I'm sure some of you are aware of the Aid Ninjas, which are part of the Aid Coalition. So that is a group of volunteers from various different organizations, which is coordinated by my friend and colleague, Billy Hill, which is a sort of, and forgive me if I'm getting this slightly wrong, but it's a kind of a Twitter, it's a group of people who have social media accounts who are able to respond really swiftly and directly and really positively, and that's an important point, to critical aid stories. Now, the key thing is it's not just about making noise, but it's about showing momentum. And again, the whole people like us thing is really, really important, because it's almost like it's quite a basic human aspect or instinct that people want to be on the winning side. People want to see that there's a momentum behind the thing that they support getting there. It's a lot harder for someone to respond to a negative aid article and go, oh, I don't agree, than it is for 40 people to come out and say, actually, I think aid is great. So the more momentum that builds, it's almost like a tide. The stronger the wave, the more people, you know, are picked up by this. So a really good example is just the way that, oh, it's literally just disappeared out of my head. Just so I was thinking about it. It was when Penny Mordaunt was going to divert aid to something. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank, which is terrible. But the long story short, this came out. There was a lot of noise about, haha, finally the Tories are doing what they're meant to be doing by, you know, slashing the aid budget or giving it to the military. And actually the ninjas were able to respond, and there was a lot of like dialogue back and forth. And it was then mentioned by DFID, who said, we saw that you were sticking up for, well, I guess it was human development, you know, kind of poverty focused aid. And that got noted. Now, somewhere along the line, it might not be a huge thing, but that will be included in the briefing of the cabinet minister. They will see that there are a lot of people out there who don't agree with, you know, giving all of our aid to the army or something like that. And they will understand, therefore, that A, it's the right thing to do, but B, there's a political cost to cutting aid like that. It's a kind of cost-benefit thing. So I hopefully those examples are useful. So elections, the 0.7 bill, and Aid Ninjas are probably three of the examples that come to my mind immediately.
Can I just jump in for a second here? I see that Gill has written something in the chat box. Gill and I went along to their ninja training last year sometime, and it's really good training. We've seemed to have been disconnected from them, so I'll reconnect you, Gill. So the idea is that people use their own kind of whatever social media they're on to, as you say, act in a positive way. And through that program, you're made sort of aware of what opportunities there are, who's saying what in the news, so you can react. But of course, everyone's got their own things that they follow, so you can do it yourself anyway. If anyone is interested in that sort of thing, I've just been emailed actually that they've got another training event planned. It's going to be in London. I think it's UNICEF, so that's in Stratford, I think. And it's on Saturday, the 12th of October. So if anyone's interested in the kind of the social media side of this kind of action, give us a shout and we can connect you up with that. But as I say, even if you're not part of that program, social media, your own social media channels generally are a good way of doing some of the things that Chris was talking about.
Great, thanks for that, Naveed, and great to hear there's going to be another training in about 6 weeks' time. We are going to now open it up for questions. So questions in the chat box, yell out questions, or you can text in questions. I have my phone right here. So you can send them texted questions into 0777 56 111 78. 0777 56 111 78.
Just to clarify, are you going to read me the questions from the chat box, or should I be taking them directly?
I don't. Oh, hang on. There's one there. Right. Yeah. There's one right at the top. I'll try and do a bit of a flow. So I'll read them out because not everybody on the call has access to the chat box. So, so why don't we start? With Pete's very first question from about 20 minutes ago. I think it was as we were discussing how great DFID is. And Pete asks, what justifies your claim that DFID is the preeminent development agency?
Great question, because it's the thing that I think a lot of politicians and often journalists, other people don't necessarily appreciate. As a quick aside, it always confuses me that you get a lot of flag waving, jingoistic media, like come on England football team, or come on this, that, and we have got probably one of the best international development agencies in the world, and yet we're not flying the flag for them anywhere near as much. And it's like, well, if you're supporting the England cricket team, surely you can support the England development team, so to speak. But that's just a personal reflection. So in terms of it being the preeminent agency, it consistently scores some of the highest rates in international kind of measurement monitoring. So there's this thing called the Aid Transparency Index, where DFID came third, and it was the highest ranked agency of any kind of government agency. I think the other two were multilateral things like the World Bank and whatnot. It is consistently found to be some of the most effective. It is also one of the ones which there's a kind of a weird counterintuitive thing here, that actually partly because of often British public skepticism to do with aid, the UK is nearly always the one that pushes up standards internationally. So do people know what the OECD DAC is? So that is the OECD Development Assistance Committee, which is the international body which sets aid rules. Now, when the UK goes and when DFID goes, or sort of the minister and whatnot goes, because we are conscious, because DFID is so conscious of public scrutiny back at home, we always demand that every other partner does a little bit more. It's like, come on, you're going to get more value for money. You're going to be more transparent. DFID also is one of the places, it's across and it's a bit more of a complicated thing, but I'm just going to try and give a simple kind of simplified answer. The way DFID works across different government departments, the way it works on different issues, security and kind of other things like that. DFID does the things that many other development agencies don't want to do. And it does the things that they kind of can't do, or does it in a more transparent and more effective way. Often the aid money that DFID spends basically has a better bang for buck than nearly anywhere else in the world. Now, if you aggregate this across all of the different areas, such as transparency, such as effectiveness, such as poverty focus, DFID really probably is one of the best. Well, okay, so I would say one of the best, if not the best, is how I would frame it.
And certainly that's echoed by the way that our international colleagues talk about their own development agencies in comparison to DFID. While Chris was talking, I put a couple of links into the chat box, one to the Publish What You Fund website, directly to the 2018 scores, where you can see that DFID is indeed third, and the best the best governmental development agency in the world on transparency, and also a link to the OECD DAC website, which is a bit geeky, but again, if you want to get into the weeds, have a dig around in there. And you know, compared to, let me give you just one example. I mean, the UK's aid development tracker, if you just Google DFID Dev Tracker, you'll have access to every single thing the UK government spends in international aid at the click of a mouse. And it is astonishing, the level of detail that's there. Our international colleagues around the world, one of their biggest and most important tasks is actually trying to figure out what they're actually spending on aid. Canada, America, they're all rubbish compared to the UK in terms of publishing that stuff, which means your ability to analyze and influence is greatly reduced. You've got to work a lot harder, and you're not being held to account in the same way. So in that sense, DFID, you know, the act of being transparent and publishing stuff forces DFID to raise its game and play at the very top of its top level, because we're all watching, and when they make a mistake, they hear from us as well, not just from the Daily Mail. Gill has a question. Gill, do you want to ask it out loud, or would you like me to read it? I'll read it. So Gill asks, Alok Sharma has been tweeting out 100 ways that UK aid works. What do you reckon about this?
First of all, I'd say only 100. So I think it's really, okay, so actually, I mean, this is where I get geeky, and this is where I have to kind of bring myself back to being, like, you know, focused on the kind of media and the public communication of this. It is, I'll be frank, building public support for aid in this age is really, really challenging. And it's amazing that you guys do what you do as a result of that. This is not an easy walk through the park. This is an uphill issue. And that's what makes it doubly important. So aid works as a government DFID thing is really, really big. 100 ways aid works, which I've kind of seen a little bit, but not too kind of familiar with. It's really important that we make sure that DFID and the Development Secretary know that there is enough public support that they have to continue to fight their corner. Because the worst thing we could have is for the Development Secretary, and it might have been the case with a couple of Development Secretaries ago, kind of think, well, what's the point in this? And then they go, well, actually, it doesn't really matter if we have an independent DFID, or 0.7. So we need to demonstrate support for them so that they go out and fight the corner in general. 100 ways that aid works is essentially it's a method to try and influence public opinion. It's not just about saying it, it is about trying to sway the kind of that the audience is talking to and their opinions. So I think it's good. I think it's definitely something that needs to be done. I think that there are probably broader and bigger and better things that we could do, but it's easy to be an armchair critic when I'm not in a cabinet position, which I'm kind of glad I'm not at the moment. Can you imagine what it's like?
It's probably quite tough.
That's an understatement.
Which I think goes into our next question, which I was just retyping into the chat box, hence the pause. It actually comes from Deirdre and Paul. I'll read it out and hit enter on the chat in just a second. She asks, how does the culture of DFID as such a positive organisation survive all this political change? From Deirdre in Poole. Now, I have an answer, but I'd like to hear yours, Chris.
Can you very quickly repeat that, because I think I might have jumbled it in my head?
Yeah, how does DFID's own self-perception, how does its culture as being such a good and positive organisation manage to survive such difficult political change?
I wish I had a clear answer. My understanding and my belief, my view on that is that I think DFID is, as I said, it's one of the preeminent organisations in the world. I think it's because it flies the flag for Britain and it does a lot of good around the world. There are very few other departments out there where you can go into work and say you go to work on the 2nd of January, because hopefully you're a bit tired on the 1st of January, and you leave work the end of the year on the 24th of December, and there are no other departments that you can see that your results have saved X million lives, educated 20 million children, or vaccinated 30 million kids. You know, can you imagine? I mean, I work at one, and I know we do a lot of good, but in terms of the direct change, if you're working in any other organization, knowing that at the end of the year you've got tangible results about like how, like, you can literally count the lives you've saved, that would make me feel quite positive. Also, I think that DFID is not necessarily above the fray. Sometimes it's used a bit of a political football, but I think compared to departments like the Home Office, or, you know, the Department for Trade or DEFRA or something like that, that is really on your doorstep. Now, DFID is a global, positive, outward-looking kind of organisation, so I think you are sort of insulated a little bit from the day-to-day fray of certain things. But that will be how I'd go. I'd be interested to hear what you've got to say, Aaron, if it kind of matched up.
Well, I think it's probably not going to be a surprise to some of the people on the call. I mean, one of the things that we do every year as part of our annual national conference is that we spend a day at DFID. We get to go in there. We go and visit them. We meet with all of the different teams that work on all of the issues that we work with. This year, we were really lucky to also land a meeting with the Permanent Secretary, which was also great in his very flash offices. And I think there is something really, really powerful about watching the way the civil servants' faces change as they realize the people that they're meeting with right now in that room are ordinary folks from all over the country who really care passionately about the things that they work on day to day, and who really, even though they recognize that DFID doesn't always get it perfectly right, they want them to succeed, and they're on their side. And I think I don't think you can say that about so many other government departments in quite the same way. The fact that we have a chance to do that every year face to face, and we do it again through how we do our letter writing, and those of us in the office get to meet those civil servants a bit more frequently, but still, they're people at the end of the day, and when they know that there are people out there on their team wanting them to succeed in their work, I believe that really does make a difference. So
yeah, I'd agree.
Do we have any other questions? I'm looking on the phone for another one. I don't have another one on the phone. Someone want to put their hand up or yell one out?
Yes. Mark from Norwich.
Oh, I think William pipped you to the post, Mark. William's going to go first, and then we'll come to you. I'll tell you what, let's take the questions 1, 2, and let Chris answer them both, because we're starting to run out of time. So, William, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, a number of years ago, we very often wrote letters directly to what I took to be DFID representatives in the countries. Are such officers still on the ground?
Great, that's a good first question. And Mark, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, in relation to what you were saying, Chris, about social media, do you think that's an idea then, if we are on social media like Twitter, to actually, when we see something from the DFID secretary or from DFID, that we actually just retweet it and put a comment to it to actually sort of show that support straight away?
Sure, okay, so yeah, let me answer that question first and then come back to the previous question. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My advice would be to be as positive and as vocal on social media as you are comfortable being. Let's face it, certain elements of the Twitterverse or Facebook can be pretty wearing, shall we say, and there is absolutely no benefit or point in putting yourself in a position where you're just getting ground down. That said, the more positive noise you can make about it, the quicker you can be about it, that's really good. And actually, here's a really important point. You don't just have to retweet for the sake of retweeting. You're not just a kind of, you know, parrot. You're not repeating it. Add your spin, add your flavor, show people that you've got a character and why you believe this. And also link it back home. Always link it back home. So I'm not sure whereabouts you're from. Norwich, is that?
Yes, that's right, yes.
So there is a really fantastic tool called From Norwich, From Your Town with Love is what one did, but there is another one that I've forgotten, and I'm really hoping that someone from Results can save me. What's it called?
It's called Norfolk Counts. I'm glad I remembered that.
Thank God. So yeah, so Norfolk Counts is a really good tool. So you can say, so Alok Sharma tweets something about, you know, vaccinating kids. And you can say, this is really important that, you know, the UK is going to do this around the world. But it's really important to know that Norfolk itself is responsible for 50,000 of those vaccinations. Like, you know, that's the size of a small town. You can make it local and make it relatable by saying, here's an example of how this is a local issue, not just an international issue. And yeah, so retweet, be positive, add your flair, but only as much as you feel comfortable doing, because there's going to be some so-and-sos, shall we say, out there who are going to pick it apart. So don't put yourself in any position where you don't feel comfortable doing it. Regarding the first question, regarding country representatives, I must admit, I'm not fully aware. I do know there are lots of different offices out there, and I know that those offices work closely with embassies. So if I'm entirely honest, I've never written a letter directly to the office in Kenya or to, in Bangladesh. But all I can say is I imagine it's quite nice. And actually, there could be quite an interesting story there. So there's a really interesting point here about how you turn a personal or nice kind of, sort of interaction into a story. Like, isn't it a lovely idea that, sorry, is that William who said that? I don't know, whereabouts are you from, William?
Yes, from Scotland.
From Scotland. Whereabouts in particular, sorry?
In Lithgow.
Lithgow.
Beside Edinburgh.
So yeah, so you could say, local Lithgow man strikes up conversation with officers in Kenya. That's actually quite a cool story. That's actually really sweet. Like, it's almost like a pen pal thing, you know. Oh wow, you've developed a relationship or a friendship or a show of support for someone who's thousands of miles away in a completely different, part of the world, and you have got something that brings you together. You've got something that bridges that gap, and that is a lovely, heartwarming story. So it's not just a nice little personal thing for you to do and for them to receive. It is actually a really good way to bring other people in your area and your community closer to the issues that you're working on.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's great. I am really sorry, but we have only 1 minute left. Jill asked the question, is there a website for everywhere, like Norfolk Council, we can find the same sort of information? Does that exist?
Well, I can plug one. I've put it. So we have launched a thing called From Your Town with Love. You put your postcode in. I can send a link through either tonight or tomorrow. You put your postcode in. It gives you a nice little kind of breakdown of what your constituency has done, and it kind of shows this many vaccines, this many stuff, and it also hopefully will have a case study of someone from your local area who's done it. So it's a really good tool to be able to kind of be armed with the evidence that's local. And I'm aware we are at time. I just want to, thank you for doing that. I've just seen the link. One thing that's really, really important, and I cannot stress this enough, is make your story local. International development, global affairs can seem really far away. And as I said, when people are already feeling under pressure because of bills and work and everything like that, they're not going to have time to give the energy of that. So if you can make it local and relevant to them, and especially with local newspaper editors, because local newspapers are really only focusing on their local area, why does that matter to the community? Always think about bringing it home.
Great, that's a wonderful way to finish. Chris, I just want to say a really, really big thank you for taking the time to share your experience and insights around publicly promoting the good that UK Aid achieves. It's really great to see the support that committed advocates like you provide. Your knowledge and enthusiasm and optimism around all this is very contagious. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you everybody else for joining the call, for all that you're doing to ensure an effective use of UK aid money on things like inclusive education, health and nutrition. I've had a really good time tonight. It's really good to see you after a month off. So many smiling faces, so much energy. It makes me really happy. Good luck with all your media actions this month. Feel free to get really creative, and thanks in advance for all of your efforts. I will retweet as many of you as I possibly can. Good night from me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evenings. Have fun, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.